Welcome everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the Sector Smart series at the Capital Analyst YouTube channel. Today we have Raghav Singh with us. Raghav is the founder of ACE Capital Services, a SEBI-registered firm that provides equity advisory services under the brand name ACE Equity Investor. ACE is one of India's first independent equity research advisors, which provides unbiased, top-notch investment research and services to retail investors at minimum fees. Raghav also successfully manages a small case called All-in-One, which is a flexi-cap portfolio aiming to deliver consistent alpha. Raghav's investment approach is based on 4 pillars: creating a focused portfolio of not more than 15 stocks, using GARP framework, which stands for growth at a reasonable price, identifying fast wealth creators, and using the holy trinity of forensic accounting, on-ground investigation, and financial analytics to select stocks. Raghav is an MBA finance and has over 12 years of experience in this domain, primarily in equity markets and investment banking in Singapore. So we are really honored to have Raghav with us to debunk the pharma sector for us and explain what are the growth drivers, key trends, and major players in this sector. Over to you, Raghav.
Hi, Prabal. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you are audible.
Okay, good. Thanks for such a nice introduction, Prabal. And really glad to be here talking to students from IM. And it's good that you have made this session open to everybody. So it's not restricted, knowledge can be shared with as many people as possible. So I think you have spoken enough about me. I'll just move on to a disclaimer because we need to do that as a SEBI registered intermediaries. So basically All-in-One is a small case which I'm managing, and there are other portfolios offline which I'm managing which are not on small case. You can find the details on the website. But important thing is we are doing this session or talk, and we will try not to take names of any stocks, because the purpose is not to make you search for stocks and buy those stocks, because they're not recommendations. So we want you to give enough information about the sector so that you yourself can do your diligence and move ahead. So if let's say during illustration I may take some of the names, but that does not mean they are recommendations. And if you have any follow-up queries, you can reach out to the team, to the email that is presented here. All right. So let's start. I think one of the questions which everybody has is how a drug is made, right? Unlike a manufacturing unit where you get raw material and you have a physical machines and there is less of a science, more of a engineering over there. But when a drug is made, it's actually different kind of chemicals which are mixed together. Those are proven chemicals, and then of course they are packaged and packed. So the starting thing is raw material, and it's also called as sometimes KSM. So I'll try to talk a lot of acronyms and try to explain what the acronyms are. I think that is the biggest turnoff for any investor who wants to understand pharma sector. So KSMs are just key starting materials. And then you have your raw materials, which are again your basic materials, which are kind of mixed together, but they do not have a specific chemical property which will shape the drug output. That chemical property is being added in form of API. API is actually active pharmaceutical ingredients. And usually API is, let's say, in terms of value might be 20% of the overall value chain. But the kind of impact which API gives to overall drug outcome or the effectiveness is huge. So API is a very important piece in this whole manufacturing process. And then you have stability materials like excipients, or they are sometimes called as intermediaries. Excipients is more a US centric word. I think in India, when they are discussing stocks, they will say, okay, you have KSMs, which are basically your raw materials. Then you have API, which makes certain chemical properties. And after that, you have your intermediaries. So what does an intermediary or excipient does is, let's say you're making NaCl. So that is a very simple sodium and chlorine made into NaCl. But let's say if you have 4 or 5 step chemistry. So you make NaCl, then you add maybe something else and make it a third product, and that third product gets added with fourth product. So as many steps are getting added, it becomes a multi-step chemistry. And all those substances that is being added in between, they are actually called intermediaries. So just to clear again, you have your raw materials or KSMs, then you have APIs, and then you have intermediaries, and also you can call them an excipients. After that, your drug is ready and you can package it and it gets shipped. But this is after drug is being manufactured, right? What happens before during the discovery of a drug? So that's a very long cycle and one of the major pain points of pharma industry at the moment. So just like you, if you have to, let's say you are a scientist and you have to manufacture or sorry, design a drug, right? Discover a drug for a particular problem. So the first thing you will do is define the problem, which is target identification over here. And once you know, okay, I'm going to treat, let's say oncology or cancer, then you have to understand within that target, what kind of chemistries can actually impact or can actually lead you towards the right outcome. So because there is already a plethora of knowledge available, right? So there are a lot of APIs, a lot of chemicals which are being used to influence the biomechanism of a body in a different way. So you will shortlist, okay, for lung cancer, these are the key medicines which are being used to treat lung, not just for cancer, just for anything. So these are the things which actually impact, improve, or maybe diminish the functionality of a certain portions of the lung. So those becomes your lead. Once you have those leads, then starts the discovery process where you will be combining different chemicals and try to see which one works better or shows a positive result. So that becomes your clinical trial. Sorry, preclinical, because you're not yet administering those chemicals. So let's say you have maybe 1,000 molecules, and after your clinical preclinical trials, you have maybe 100 molecules or 50 molecules. So there's a lot of rejection which happens in the initial stages. Uh, and then those selected molecules will be tested firstly in a clinical fashion on animals. So it might be your your mice or maybe some goat or some other animals. And once that is satisfactory, maybe your 50 molecules gets reduced to 10 molecules. Then we'll be conducting human trials. So human trials also has different phases: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So your phase 1 will actually be tested on a perfectly good condition human beings, because you want to ascertain that your medicine works with the healthy and normal people. Then after those results, again, that pipeline of 50 molecules maybe will become 10 molecules. And you will be then testing it based on phase 2, which is you will be taking some patients which have certain diseases. Let's say a patient with diabetes. But again, it won't be like you are conducting a big study. It's again restricted to maybe 300-400 guys selected sample. And after that, you will be going into phase 3. By this stage, the 1,000 molecule gets actually reduced to maybe 2 or 3 molecules only. And during this phase 3, you are going to expand your sample size. So this sample size can go maybe 10 times to 12 times, 15 times of what you initially sampled. And here you can increase more complexity. So you might want to test it on the patients who are, let's say, having diabetes as well as hypertension, maybe some other specific condition related to, let's say if it's a cancer, maybe that person has a blood cancer, you want to see how it works if that person gets lung cancer also. And once you get all these details, you have a reasonable amount of evidences to file to FDA, which is called NDA, New Drug Application. And the regulatory authority in US, it's US FDA, will be checking all your claims and validating it with your own team, and will give you a license. Once you get the license, then all those things which we discussed here kicks in, which is manufacturing. Uh, Pretty much this is what it is, the overall cycle. And so based on this cycle, you can see basically there are three parts. One is your discovery, other is your development, and after development is a small cycle of patent, getting the license, and commercialization. Now, because the cycle, it takes around 1 to approximately 10 to 12 years from discovery all the way till development. And and after that, you get a license validity period, let's say 8 or 10 years, right? So it's a significant amount in a drug's journey. And the amount of money these days these companies are investing is maybe $1 billion to $3 billion, which is a huge amount. To reduce that amount, one of the ideas has come up to, okay, we will outsource some of the research activities to capable scientists abroad who are working at a cheaper man-hour rates. So basically cheap resources, but skillful. You can't just outsource it to Zimbabwe where people are more cheaper, but there should be skill, there should be a scale, and there should be integrity with the country. Uh, some of the US companies might be wary of giving such kind of contracts to, let's say, countries where there is a political instability, or countries where they think their IPs won't be protected, let's say North Korea or China. So India fits that bill. We are a democracy and the organizations are fairly reasonable. So there is a certainty that my secret formula of that drug won't be leaked outside. So that is where a lot of CRO kind of contracts are coming. And after CRO, let's say there can be two kind of contracts. One is, okay, you only do the drug discovery, the preclinical work for me, mixing chemistries and finding out the results and sending that results electronically to me, right? Other can be CDMO. So you are doing starting from the development stage, which is that you have your own mouse, mice, buffalo, selected people on whom you are going to test that and send results back to me. Third is commercialization, which is M, the manufacturing. So essentially, it can be, I mean, these words are a lot of times interchangeably used, but basically if you see R, that means the research part is being given. If you see D, that means development, which is the clinical part. And if you see M, that means it's the manufacturing part. So it's CDMO or yeah, if you do all of them, it becomes CRAMS. So from research to maybe development to manufacturing. And this is a big tailwind for pharma industry because we have scientists and we have factories. So what happens is if one of the molecule is successful and you are the one who has tested it, clinically. So the original pharma company might as well give you the manufacturing licenses as well, outsource their manufacturing process to you. So this is called as CRAMS. Till here, I guess you guys are with me and I'm not speaking at a very fast pace. Is that okay, Prabal? Okay.
Yes, I think it's very clear, sir.
Fine. So that was the pharma value chain and how a drug is discovered and how a drug is made. Let's talk about the business side of it. So what is the pharma market that we have? So the estimates says that roughly around $1,200 billion is the market, 1,200. And if you can see, most of it is actually in United States. Then you have your Europe, which is roughly 264 billions. China has risen up very recently in last 3-4 years. So earlier they used to do like 60-70 billion, but now they have crossed 100 billion mark. And actually they have surpassed Japan, maybe because of the population effect and the GDP, the per capita income is also growing. Now, if you see India, I think we are doing 16, 17. So maybe this year results are not yet out. Might be we'll be doing 19 to 20 billion dollars. So it's a still relatively very, very small market. You compare 18 billion dollars versus 500 billion dollars that people are, the market size is there in US. But again, the competition is also proportional. So the competition is US is intense. Including the scientific competition, including the political and the diplomatic competitions, which might be little lesser in India. So this is the overall market size. And yeah, so this slide is very interesting. So you see the price of a drug post-launch for the originator. Originator means the person, the company which has actually manufactured or innovated that drug. They are called innovators. So I will probably use the word innovator for a simplicity. So the prices rise after commercialization, and once their patent expires, then other people because it's no longer patented. Anybody can make those drugs. Those are called generic drugs. So and as soon as generic drugs are introduced into the market, originator or innovator has to decrease their prices, and the generic drugs picks up. So basically, for an innovator, the overall cycle finishes after patent expiry. They are not going to make much money once license or patent is expired. And for the generic drug sellers, the opportunity only starts after patent expiry. So most of the Indian companies traditionally has been doing generic or bulk drug sales. So they were, I mean, patent expiries are in the public domain, so you will know when such and such drug is getting expired. You can file to US regulators, and I will talk about what are the steps in filing to US regulators and those value chain. And the generic sales boom picks up, and the innovator has to probably think about stuffing his pipeline for a new molecule where the same cycle gets repeated. So you can see the financial reward is heavier for the people who are on the left hand side of the value chain versus the right hand side of the value chain. But again, the risk is also lesser because a generic manufacturer is picking a proven drug, which is known to people. Doctors prefer it, right? So they don't have to innovate or spend those $1 billion, $3 billion to just do R&D and development of the drugs. But their rewards are limited. So that is where I think these commentaries which we have written, that there is a pressure on pharmaceutical firms nowadays, and actually their pipelines are getting drier and drier. The reason being, as an investor, nobody has time to really give you billions and billions of dollars of money and then sit for 12 years. 12 years is a long period. So the VC money still is flowing, but there is a lot of pushback to expedite or shorten this cycle. And so the risk taking capacity is slowly decreasing, and that's a cause of concern for the innovator companies. But for Indian pharma, again, they are not into this value chain at all. So they are happy. They're happy to sell generic sales. But the bad thing is in generic sales also competition is increasing. So you have your competition coming from Latin America, from Israel, Teva and Mylan. All these guys are attacking continuously to people like to companies like Sun Pharmaceuticals, who are the bulk generic manufacturer. So I think this is what I roughly talked about just now. So you have your research, trials, manufacturing. Okay, compliance and patient care. So this is a portion which is not discussed much in public domain, but because it's not present so much in India, but it is there in developed countries. It's actually called pharmacovigilance. So pharmacovigilance, I think I have covered in later slides, so we'll talk about it. Just for the moment you understand, it's vigilance that a pharma company has to continuously do after getting the license. So once you're selling your drugs to the general public, you have to still collect the data, analyze how that is impacting to certain patients, or what is the efficiency rate, let's say in an Asian subjects or Asian patients versus, let's say, an American patient. Because you're initially, remember those stage 1, stage 2 were actually done at with a very limited sample size. But not much focus is being placed as far as I can sense. So this is an area which I have marked, kind of separated it out. So right now, India is present in drug research in terms of a lot of companies are getting those CRO kind of projects where they are helping in the research. And also now we have established our presence in clinical trials as well, where we are getting the CDMO, the development portion of it. And of course, the generic manufacturing. In compliance and patient care, I don't think many Indian companies are there, may probably nil. And Novo Nordisk might be there, and they are outsourcing some of the IT work to companies like TCS. So there is an indirect play, but there's no direct play in this segment. Okay, so because US is our biggest market, so everybody wants to file patent, and you will keep on hearing a lot of abbreviations used for the US patent, right? And at times investors don't understand that what does it mean. So basically there are two kinds of patents. One is that you're filing an ANDA, which is abbreviated new drug application, which means drug is not new, its patent has expired, and I'm going to sell a generic drug. And it can be under 4 different sections of the regulatory clause that they have. So if somebody is filing ANDA for para 1, that means it's a drug for which nobody has ever filed a patent. So it's an easier kill, but hardly there will be a large selling drug where patent has not been filed. Doesn't happen. Then para 2 is for where patent has expired, and you are trying to file it. So let's say in case of polio, so polio, the most of the patents might have expired, and the disease has also drastically gone down in Asia. So no, maybe the ANDAs are not being filed as aggressively, and suddenly let's say there is an spike in polio cases. So over there the patents are expired, but nobody has also filed ANDA, so you can go and do ANDA. Then the third one is the most killer category, where all the Indian pharmas are eyeing like vultures. So basically it's para 3, where patent is going to expire. And there is a lot of patent which is going to expire in 2023. So we might see that generic might again come back in business post 2023. The last one, para 4, is the most there are a lot of litigations around it. So basically what you're saying that patent which a certain company has, let's say Pfizer, is not valid. There is some misrepresentation or some of the things are missing. So I'm technically challenging it, and it's a most troublesome kind of a ANDA filing. So ideally we should try to stay away, because those litigations are being challenged by lawyers from both the sides, and results or the decision of the courts can go anyway. So it's not the best category to measure any company if you're really looking into generic space. I think para 3 will be the best one to understand the pipeline, what potential a company has in future. Then NDA is new drug application. Of course, it's branded, your own name. Let's say Pfizer is filing NDA, so it will be Pfizer Medicines. And you have two kind of certifications, one or two. So one is it's a brand new medicine which is being put for human trials. And the two is if you are increasing the dosage or let's say the delivery mechanism. So if it was an oral pill, maybe you are filing for an injectable, or maybe you're filing for an inhaler. So those are same medicines, but a different delivery method. Or maybe it was earlier 20 mg, you're filing for 40 mg. Or maybe you're filing for an extended release kind of a medicine. So the delivery mechanism again changes and you need to file an NDA. So this is the overall jargons around the patent structure that you have in US pharma. Okay, talking about the market. So there's a entity called Pharmacy Benefit Manager, PBM. And again, this is not much talked about in a lot of spaces, and I will tell you the reasons why. But basically what happens is, let's say drug manufacturer, you're here, it's a Pfizer or it can be Sun Pharma. This PBM, the whole job is that they will be doing bulk negotiations on behalf of the government health plan. So unlike India, where most of the people pay for the medical expenditure out of their own pocket, in developed countries, most of it is being funded by the government, or at least there is a co-payment system where large funding comes from the government, small funding you have to manage on your own. So to ensure that governments are getting good rates, good discounts, they create this entity called Pharma Benefit Manager, and their job is to do negotiations, do a bulk negotiation, get a discount, get a rebate, and pass on those benefits to the government. So basically, once patient is going to a clinic, let's say government hospital in a developed country, he's getting the treatment and he's paying a portion of the bill and walking away. Now that bill and that pills which or drugs whichever has been consumed, they get it cheaper because they are getting it from Pharma Benefit Manager. So as a concept, it's very good. And if you have a pharmacy, there's another structure where pharmacy might be contacting some wholesaler, and wholesaler again might be doing the same thing, which is negotiate, for a bulk purchase. The catch is this PBM is a private entity, so it's not a it works for the government, and this structure only exists in US. Even Canada don't have, or even your UK don't have such kind of structure. So there's a lot of opaqueness in terms of how much benefit they are actually passing on to the health ministry. So There are certain proposals where congressmen are asking that, okay, let's make some rule that they have to mandatorily pass 95 to 90% of the benefits to the government sector. And there is a bone of contention called as spread. So let's say the PBM says, okay, government XYZ, you buy 5 million doses of such and such drugs, I will give you this rebate. But if you fail to buy 5 million drugs in a year, if you buy 4 million drugs, then I'm going to charge differently. And that is there in the contract clauses. And in case that happens because of, let's say, COVID, suddenly the demand for certain other treatments have decreased, so they can't meet those volumes. Then the actual price which they are paying is actually higher than what the same drug would cost at a pharmacy. So, so this is one of the bone of contention where a lot of furor is there in US. And I don't know what is good or bad. US guys are the best judge, but I think this structure is probably more complicated and could have been simplified. Like in India, we don't have any PBMs as such. And the problem is these PBMs are getting consolidated in US. So they have larger say with respect to drug manufacturer, with respect to the pharmacies. So, and they have something called formulary. So if you want to sell paracetamol over there, you have to somehow convince these PBM guys to include paracetamol in the list of prescription list of medicines that is called formulary. Because if it's not in the formulary, your paracetamol, no matter how effective, how good it is, it will never land to the health ministry or to the to the hospitals, government hospitals, or to the pharmacy through PBM. You can always try this direct route. So that gives them a lot of advantage, and because consolidation is happening, so people are not sure how much benefits is being passed and how much benefit is being silently. And these are not public companies, so they are not liable to explain everything to the public. Only the private shareholders they are liable. Okay, so we land to, you have covered US. Let's come to Indian pharma. So Indian pharma history, or you can say it's a snapshot of Indian pharmaceutical industry. Also, one differentiation to make in Indian pharma industry. When we say Indian pharmaceutical market, that means the amount of medicines or the expenses being incurred in a pharma market by Indians. That is different from the amount of sales that Indian companies are doing by exports. So that might be a larger number. But when we talk about Indian pharma market, that is which is $18 billion, it is the amount of expenses that Indians are doing within their geographical boundaries. So in anyway, the pharma industry overall, we are the generic pharma factories of the world. One in every third drug being consumed in US, which is generic, is from India, and one in every fifth in UK. And outside US FDA, US, the number of approved plant by FDA, India has most of it. I think roughly 46 to 47% of plants lying outside US is in India, which is an amazing work that these pharma companies have done over the years. And doesn't stop here. Even for future also, half of the ANDA's filings are actually done by Indian generic manufacturers. So as I said, they keep a very close or keen eye on para 3 kind of a ANDA filings where patents are expiring. So they always try to participate and file ANDAs. And the last one is about the vaccine production. So Serum Institute is there. Piramal is also there. They're pretty big in terms of the scale, manufacturing scale they have. So roughly 6 out of 10 vaccines is kind of manufactured in India. Don't take these numbers with the COVID vaccines, because COVID vaccines, even if it makes less commercial sense, it will still be manufactured in US. But in a general scenario, the number of vaccines which is being produced, most of them are outsourced to India because it's cheaper to manufacture here. And I think I talked about this, what makes it special. One is the low cost labor. If I compare with China, our wages are roughly 1/3, primarily because the wages in China have gone up, but in India it has still remained stagnant. So India still have a lot of competitive advantage when it comes to global outsourcing hubs. If you have to spend, let's say, $100 in China, then in India, I think nowadays you can do the same amount of work with $95. And the major reason is the electricity cost has come at par with China, and the labor cost, which earlier Chinese were at par with Indian, so they have gone up. So the gap has actually closed, and that is creating a very good, or I can say, change dynamics in the global trade, where a lot of people are looking to give a lot of work to Indian companies, whether it's pharma or chemical or any other industry, basically manufacturing industry. So what are the trends in Indian pharma? One of the problem or the trend which we can see is all the large cap pharmas are not able to grow at the speed which they earlier used to grow. So the concept of generic manufacturing hadn't really taken off, but I think somewhere around 2003, 4, 5, it really took off. And Sun Pharma, your Lupin, Cadila, Cipla, all these companies kept on growing for number of years, But as it happens in economics, anything which is good, if you have good margins, more suppliers will come. And that is what exactly happened in generic market, because uh, there is no moat as such with these players. You're making a known formulation, basically reverse engineering and copy, not pasting, copy manufacturing that drug. So anybody can do that, right? With the similar level of labor arbitrage over US or maybe over India, you can even sell cheaper generic medicines. And any developed country, because they are paying significant amount of medical expenditure with government subsidies, so they always look for the cheaper providers. So that is where the Indian companies, the larger companies, have were forced to reduce their prices. So you would have heard this term of price erosion. It's actually like Sun Pharma was selling for $100, and because somebody from Mexico is selling at $80, so they also need to make it $80. Suddenly somebody from Israel is selling at 70, and Sun Pharma won't be able to get contracts. So they have to probably sell at 65. So this price erosion actually caused a lot of pains somewhere around. I think this graph shows this beautifully, right? After 2012, there has been a decline in the growth rate, and this decline in the growth rate is in terms of value, not in terms of volume. Yeah, because still people are popping same number of pills, and probably aging population is increasing. So the volumes are growing, but value is coming down because the per unit price is getting diminished. So knowing that, what the new trends which is emerging, let's say from 2018 onwards, is that the larger companies are trying to focus more to move into biosimilars or create specialty generics. So specialty generics is same generic medicine, but you add certain more chemicals to treat more than one condition, or maybe you target new therapeutic areas. So let's say in India, we get these medicines which has little bit of paracetamol and little bit of the cold medicines, right? Cold drugs. So you call it D-cold and things like that. So these are actually a mixture, 50% of something and 50% of something. Both are generic, but this combined mixture is little unique. So this gives them a certain amount of moat. So yeah, large players are doing that, and also they're trying to see if they can break through the biosimilar space, which is highly competitive. But the mid cap players have no such baggage, right? Smaller companies or mid cap companies which are still smaller in size, they never had these generic revenues. So they have a time period where they can grab the CDMO or CRAMS kind of a model, that okay, I'm not going to be a generic player. I will be helping our Western innovators to develop or research these drugs. And if that becomes successful, we will be the one who will be manufacturing for them. So this is a new model, and that's why you can see the growth for large caps reduced, but the mid caps are growing because their sizes are small. So if a company is doing, let's say, 500 crores of revenue annually, and they get suddenly a contract of 200 crores, right, for spread over 3-4 years, all straight away their revenues will jump, and then the share market appreciates these kind of inputs, and then they will give them a higher valuation. So all those kind of things I can see that is being played currently in Indian pharma. And there are certain sections of the delivery methods, or let's say of the pharma segment, which have a high entry barrier. One of them is injectables. Injectables are directly administered into the veins. It's not like an oral pill which you pop and then it goes to your intestine and things like that. So the regulations around injectables are super tight, and the uh, the risk levels are very high. So if you there is a slight impurity, US FDA will cancel all your orders, or the regulators will cancel all your orders. So what will happen? There might be a chance of significant downside, right? But that also makes this area relatively untouched. So there are firms like I think Kaplan and Gland Pharma. They are doing big in injectables, and they are only focusing on injectables. So this is one way of transforming yourself from a generic manufacturer to maybe a specialized manufacturer of, let's say, injectables or maybe complex uh, generic medicines. And of course, the last one is the China plus one. I think I'll cover it during the later part of the slide. That thing needs discussion on its own. So we've covered, I think, how the value chain works, how the drug is manufactured, what is US market challenges over there, and then Indian market. So let's talk about the overall global challenges that pharma sector as a whole is facing. Uh, One of them is a lack of pharmacovigilance. So there was a drug called Dipakine from Sanofi, which was very well used for 50 years, right? It was for treating epilepsy. And when Sanofi got the patent, I think they probably their scientists know that it is harmful to the unborn child, but still the sample size was not having enough evidences for the regulators to object, and the drug got passed. It was used for 50 years, and later only during the you can say some form of pharmacovigilance, it was found out, or the activist actually raised their voices against Sanofi that it is causing neural defects to the unborn child if mother has epilepsy and she's taking that treatment. Now, why there is a lack of focus? You imagine you are a business. Your whole purpose is for getting the license, right? Getting the patent. Once you have the patent, you're into the down cycle, and nobody wants to invest so much into the down cycle. The objective is to get more profit out of it, and that is why probably lesser focus is being put on pharmacovigilance. But there is a reputational risk for any company. If something goes horribly wrong, uh, they will be liable, and there can be severe penalties. But does that impact their new NDA filings? I think no. So maybe regulators can make certain changes where they take into account if you had certain pharmacovigilance issues in the past, you won't be getting any NDAs in the future. That will enforce pharma companies to put more focus on pharmacovigilance. Then of course, patient, I think in general, everywhere patient has a little bit of poor experience, because the structure is so complex. Most of the guys are focusing on regulators, PBMs, intermediaries, how to keep pharmacies happy, how to keep your brokers or the wholesalers happy. And the job of keeping patient experience at a high level is left totally to the healthcare administrations, which are often funded by government subsidies, and of course they are too tight on the budget. And because the window of patent holding is so less, that a lot of times the cost at which a branded drug will sell will be very high. So I've given in one example of sunitinib. It's for stomach cancer, and recently it went off patent in 2021, I think March. So what happened is Pfizer was holding that patent, and these are the prices which I took from 1mg.com. You can also check it if it has changed or remains the same. So 7 tablets cost 60,000 rupees, which a branded Pfizer was selling since last 10 years. Now a treatment needs 2 to 3 months of consumption of that tablet. So roughly 60 to 90 tablets. So the cost itself is like 4 or 5 lakhs for people in India, where I don't think it's very affordable thing. But once it goes off patent, Natco Pharma, Beta Drugs, they started selling this drug at, you can see the kind of price erosion has happened. You can see, right? So this is what typically happens when patent is gone. The price straight away drops roughly 70% 1 year. Then next 2 3 years, it plateaus around 85% price erosion. So So yeah, patients have to bear the cost for all the regulations, all the complications that is there in the system, and that really leads to increase in the cost of the drug, because the innovator has to recover all his cost within those patent holding period. And last one is the cost of the drug development. I think I kind of touched upon this in my earlier slides, that since it is causing a lot of billions of dollars in the long time span, so not many people are interested in funding such kind of ventures. And it's also true that a lot of pharma companies are these days crying, especially the innovator pharma, the big pharma in US. They are crying that we are not making enough margins to pump money into the research and development. And the reason is because there is a lot of public hue and outcry. Insurance agencies are saying your drugs cost too much. But what they are saying, their version is that since we are incurring this much cost, if we don't sell it at even these kind of prices, there is no money left to do innovation in future. And that reminds me one of the quote which Kiran Majumdar Shah, I think, posted on Twitter recently, that a lot of VCs are not investing in this space because it needs a technical or scientific mindset, which they don't have. So they'll be happy to invest in general supply chain kind of or maybe internet or platform companies, rather than investing into these kind of ventures where you need a technical acumen. All right, so how many minutes? I think I'm speaking since long. I'll try to wrap it up, and then we'll take questions and answers. As long as you guys have, I can spend maybe 30, 40 minutes. I don't mind. So biotech, it's the next step of pharma industry, or maybe overall industry as a whole. So what is a biotech? It's basically your genome studies. So all the genomes are basically made up of your DNA, right? And these DNAs are again made up of your four bases, your adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine. So these are like your alphabets. Like in English, we have 24, 26 alphabets, right? 24 alphabets. In DNA, you have these four alphabets. So the whole sequencing is written in a combination of A, G, T, C, C, T, A, G, things like that. And there are so many combinations in a person's body that if you have to really read out this pattern, it will roughly take you 57 years. There are roughly 3 billion pairs of such bases, and since each is in pairs, so you get roughly like 6 billion pairs. And that is why the genome sequencing is one of the challenging thing. It used to cost a lot, I think thousands of dollars in the past, but now the cost is coming down. So it's a very interesting field, and one of the great breakthrough which has happened. Actually, it has been like 10 years, but commercially, or you can say more in a more sustained way, it has really come up in last 3 or 4 years. So it's called as CRISPR. You can read the full form. It's clustered regulatory interspace short palindromic repeats. So what is a CRISPR? It's a very interesting term. We are going to hear this again and again in future. So basically, it's a method to do gene editing. So when a person has some kind of a gene defect, a lot of times this combination of A, G, T, C is not proper. So let's say it should be A, G, T, C. It is in some other fashion. Now, if a doctor or a scientist can do gene mapping and can really find out where that problem lies. So there is a method called CRISPR, which is kind of a scissor, molecular scissor, we call it. It can be injected inside a patient's body, and it will simply cut, copy, paste that bad portion of your gene, and so that the new cell production and hence your tissue production, muscle production will be for a healthier from a healthier gene patterns. Now how that works, it's pretty complicated. If I have to summarize it, uh, there is something called mRNA. So mRNA is nothing but messenger RNA. So you think of DNA as a code, right? And mRNA as a transcriptor. So the job of mRNA is to take those codes A, D, C, G and come out of the nuclei and create the amino acids using translating the DNA patterns. And that amino acids later become your muscle, your organs, and things like that. So and that is, it's actually what even the viruses use. So even coronavirus is an RNA virus, right? What it does is it can potentially do the reverse transcription. So the coronavirus has certain RNA pattern, and it can actually go and do impact your DNA because by doing the reverse transcription, right? So it's a very interesting field, and there are a lot of use cases which are happening and which will happen in the future. It's still under development, and of course, there's an ethical angle to it. So mostly, it's restricted right now to crop production, your plants and seeds and things like that, and to an extent to the animal health as well. But to human health, people are extremely careful, extremely selective, because anything which has a good use case can also have a bad use case. It may happen that people say, I need such and such kind of a baby, strong soldier, bright minds, things like that. So that's why it's a very closely guarded technology. But let's see how the time comes. But definitely the good use cases which I have written here is it can really help people uh, to get well. So one of the first use cases in US was Victoria Gray. So she had the sickle cell disease, where she used to have sudden pains in her muscles. The pain was so much and so intense that she can't do anything during that time, and she keeps on crying. So it seems the sickle cell identification was relatively easier, and scientists or her doctors were able to identify which portion of the gene is actually causing that problem. So they did this CRISPR, and she was the first patient to go under through this CRISPR, and she's perfectly fine as of now. The other interesting use cases of biotech is you can actually before I explain this, so people are trying to harvest pigs' organs for human transplants. So transplanting those organs in humans. So let's say heart and lungs are a little similar to humans as they are in pigs. And the DNA structure is such that humans have a similarity of 85% with mouse, right? With mice, you can say, and 95% similarity with chimpanzees. Almost 99.9% humans are similar in their DNA structure, the genome. Only at this point, 1% is actually factoring for all the differences that you see between different kind of people in the world. So it's not, and interesting thing is the banana, right? Our fruit is also 60% similar as to humans in terms of gene structure. So, so there is a possibility if you can correctly identify what kind of gene is causing a certain outcome, and if you can isolate and try to replace or maybe damage that altogether, that is also one of the techniques. Then a lot of things can be done. So yeah, there are companies in America who are trying to genetically modify the pig. What happens to pig, I don't know, but at least the pig's organ they are thinking to use for humans. And then there are fruits like ground cherry, which Cornell University thinks that they can modify it, remove a little bit of sourness, make it a little more sweet, and make it mainstream. Basically, it's a commercial interest. And the last one, which I've written, is very interesting. So in London Imperial College, the researchers are trying to develop a mosquito, where the females won't have ability to conceive or lay eggs. So what will happen is if you release such kind of mosquitoes, they will intermingle with other mosquito population, and all the females born out of that population won't be able to, pass on any new eggs. Sorry. So if you do that, probably after 8 or 9 generations, maybe in few months' time, the population of mosquito in that area will be gone. So it's again interesting use case, but these things needs to be handled very carefully because it can eliminate one of the species altogether, and nature's balance can get impacted. All right, Q&A. So a lot of talking from my side. Prabal, over to you. Let's see
Yeah,
what are the questions which we have in the chat.
I think the first question is from Medha. Can innovators look at extending their patent life when it's about to expire?
By right, just as a rule of thumb, they can't. But if you are saying that my same drug is not delivering a different effect because I'm adding certain things, then you can file for the NDA in the certification too. But if you're selling the same thing, you're just being greedy and asking, hey, give me 3 more years of license, that won't happen.
Then Harsh is asking, how does the product life cycle differ for vaccines?
It's not too much different because even for vaccine, when there was a development of corona vaccine, right? So we all heard that a certain vaccine is in phase 2 of trial, phase 3 of trial. So basically, it's all chemicals. So it's the same, not too much different. And that also reminds me a certain portion which I missed in my presentation. So there are two kinds of medicines. One is the chemical drugs, which is your normal drugs, and then you have bio drugs, biosimilars. So the small molecules are called chemically or synthetic drugs, where you are mixing different chemicals and achieving a different combination. But the bio drugs, let's say insulin, which is, or let's say breast milk, it's not a drug, but it's again a product which scientists are trying to do biosynthesis of mother's breast. In fact, there is a company in London which is trying to do that. They will take tissue samples from the mother and try to create liters and liters of baby milk once it's ready and can hand it over. So you can feed your own baby your own milk, but you don't have to really do breastfeeding all the time. So these are bio drugs, right? So the shift in general is from moving away from your chemical drugs and moving more towards the bio drugs because they are much safer and it's much environment friendly as well. So to answer your question, there's not much difference in my opinion for the vaccines or the drugs, roughly the same.
Okay, I think next we can take up Akshay's question. He says the US FDA has significantly increased the cost of filing an NDA or ANDA in the recent times. Uh, so, what are your views on this, and which metrics should we look at to value the potential of a new generic drug player in the market, given that their margins are already very low?
Interesting question. Thanks. See, US FDA is increasing the cost because it's a easier source of revenue. So all across the world, people are filing NDAs, ANDAs. So why don't we just increase the cost and get some money from there? I think it's as simple as that. But how to evaluate a generic firm? Two things you need to see: what is their paid, what is their ANDA pipelines? So and what is the potential market size of the drugs they are targeting, right? So once US FDA grants you an ANDA, you get an exclusivity of I think 6 months. So for those 6 months only, you can sell that generic drug in that market. So those 6 months, these guys make a killing, and after that, obviously the competition will enter. So some pricing power is there for a period of 6 months after you get the ANDA, provided you are the one of the first one to get that NDA. Now, uh, firms, let's say Natco Pharma, so they don't chase the normal generics. So they are only chasing the complex generics where not many people can really manufacture or have those chemistry skills to make or manufacture those kind of drugs. So you look for the companies which are making highly complicated, maybe 6, 7 step kind of a drug, and which has a high market potential, which has a lower competition. And I can give another example. Again, my stock names are not recommendations. They're just an example which are popping up in my mind. So there's a company called Fridun Pharmaceutical, which is a very small company. They're not doing anything great, but the management is smart that they are catering to the unmet needs. So these African markets where a lot of medicines are not reaching because they're very small market share, maybe less than 1 billion or so. So all the large pharmas are missing from there. But how about in some Indian small cap pharma, which is trying to sell aggressively only over there, and they make an aggregation of all these smaller countries with the orphan kind of drugs, start selling over there. Uh, it's a good revenue jump which they can make till they figure out, okay, what's next leg of growth. So yeah, these are some of the things that you can see, and always try to see the market size versus the kind of drugs they are manufacturing. If it is too simple, probably it's not exciting enough.
Okay. I think Anand has a question. You can see if you want to answer it. So he's asking, what is the ideal time for a pharma stock investment, depending on which part of the value chain that company focuses on?
I think if you have to really look at a pharma industry, I would say the next leg of growth is going to come from CRAMS. So instead of putting too much focus on generics, generics can be a good play if you are looking in specific use cases of generics. But a Sun Pharma, by selling the same medicines, is not going to make a huge dent. And also they are earning a lot of revenue. So thousands of crores of revenue cannot be, you can't make a 1,000 crore revenue to 2,000 crore revenue. It's not that easy. But a person doing 200 crores of revenue can definitely make it 400 crores of revenue. So it is difficult for generic pharmas to really go big from here onwards. But CDMO and CRAMS is a very lucrative area. I tell you why. It's an outsourcing work. Even if that molecule is not successful, still you get paid for the services you're providing. So you get money, right? And let's say if that molecule is successful, that original innovator, most likely if you have capacity, will give you the license to manufacture from India at a cheaper cost, because they don't want to take the pains, to explain the same chemistry or explain the same skills to another player and then expect same kind of quality output. So it's a dream business where you get paid for doing the innovation and you also get paid for doing the manufacturing, while the bulk of the risk is actually transferred to the innovator. So yeah, CRAMS is a good area to look at currently.
So there's an interesting question Lakshay asked. So he says, what are the best ways to take some exposure in vaccine makers, maybe indirectly by supply chains? Is there any way to get investment exposure to vaccine makers in India right now?
There is one challenge in vaccine manufacturing. The biggest manufacturer, Serum Institute, is private, and then you have Piramal, which is public. But I don't value Piramal greatly because of the capital allocations, because they are kind of a bit of many things and obviously big in vaccines. So in terms of the straight away vaccine manufacturers, probably not great opportunities over there. But you can look at some of the injectile players who are tapping into areas which are very niche and which have very high margins. Look at the margins of Gland Pharma. You will be surprised to see how a outsourced pharma player is making such kind of a margin. But it's there because not many people are venturing to take a risk with the US FDA and sell something which can be injected directly in patients' veins. So look for those kind of players. It will be much better from a financial or investing point of view.
Okay. So we have a question. So pharma companies essentially reinvest a major chunk of their earnings into R&D and D and capex. So how to analyze these investments and gauge potential future returns from these investments, if there are any?
That's not a straight answer. You typically you can judge a company how much percentage they are spending in R&D. So mostly Indian companies spend, let's say, 4 to 5%. Some of the companies, Sun Pharma spends a lot. They might be spending 8 to 9% or 10%. The global innovators might be spending 20 to 22%. So it's a natural tendency. Whosoever is spending a lot of money in R&D, they should be having more results, right? But again, uh, there are catches. Let's say if you're spending a lot, but you're not getting the desired output, or maybe there's a long cycle play, which I can see in the cases of, let's say again, Sun Pharma. I will take an example where they are, I think they have spent close to half a billion to 1 billion USD into biosimilar space. And biosimilar is a very tricky space because the cultured cell differ based on humidity, based on temperature, based on the environment, so many factors. So getting a consistency and filing an US FDA for a biosimilar drugs is extremely difficult unless US FDA becomes little lenient. So yes, look for the R&D as a percentage of the sales, and also look at what kind of R&D they are doing. Is it a long gestational period R&D where you may not succeed, or is it something short where they are doing some kind of R&D in a proven blockbuster medicine, or maybe something upcoming which has high probability of success and a shorter cycle. That will give you a better chance of investing success.
Okay, great. We have another question. So Lakshay asks, what is your approach on evaluating an API maker? So I think you can answer it both qualitatively as well as
Yeah.
what are the key financial metrics you should look when like analyzing a pharma company.
API is a very big theme. I think after CRAMS, the second biggest theme which is being played out in India is API. But API won't be the longevity is not as long as CRAMS. So API, I think roughly 65% API is in India, or maybe 70% is getting imported from China. And because of the coronavirus and lockdowns and shipping challenges, everybody is shifting their supply chain, either making it in-house, the APIs, or getting from Indian pharma players, API manufacturers. So in a foreseeable future, maybe 2-3 years down the line, almost all the API players, Tom, Dick, and Harry, Acha, Gunga, Behra, Langda, so everybody will be able to sell their API capacities because demand is intense. I mean, imagine a 65% dependence suddenly coming back to India. So whosoever is selling that API will get picked up, and at the same time, a lot of API capacities will come. So Davis Lab is doing a huge mega capacities in API. So in API, it's I mean, as of now, you look for the players. If you have to look at qualitatively, the players who have better margins in API, and only those players will have better margins who are doing some high chemistry skill API, not just a generic API. So in API also you have simple APIs and complex APIs. And the APIs, let's say there might be an API for antiretroviral. So somebody might be doing API for the penicillin, right? Those kind of APIs are very old and probably many people are making it. But if you can make an API for some API for some oncology drugs, right? That can be a selling like a hotcake. So you have to see what kind of API they are manufacturing and what is the proven margin that these guys are making on previous APIs that they sold. There can be case that some of the pharma API player is actually migrating from a low sales APIs to low margin APIs to high margin APIs. So that will be a subjective call. You have to see case by case basis. But in general, I think API is going to have a golden period for a short to medium term. After that, if too much capacities come, then also it's a problem. Too much supply and maybe stagnant or lesser demand. So, but yeah, API is a good space to be.
Then we have a question. So, what is more important to consider before investing? The current drugs that the firm already has got approved, the pending NDAs, ANDAs that it might have in the pipeline, or what is its global market share and global diversified reach?
See, stock market is a discounting machine. So if there is a license or they have some approval for existing generic drug, right? Market would have already discounted that. So that is reflecting in the stock price. So most of the time you have to see what is in the pipeline, what is in store in the future. So all investing game is a rule of probabilities, right? You're playing with, okay, this much probability and this is the market cap. If they capture, let's say 10% of the market cap, they will make this much of revenue. So yeah, you have to look at the pipeline. The past is good only if there is a special scenario where market for some reason is not recognizing that company, and that also happens. But I don't think in current bull market that is such opportunities exist anymore. But they were there last year. Sorry, last year when market was down and then Corona happened, market again jumped, right? Sorry, went down around. So there were cases. I'll quote a real estate example, not just pharmaceutical. So there's a company called Ashiana Housing, and these guys, I think they were trading at 300 crore market cap, and the sales order that they confirmed that year or booked that year was higher than their overall market cap. So you see, the situation was that technically you can buy the whole company in 300 crore rupees if you have and if they are willing to sell, and you're getting 400 crores back in next 1 year in form of the confirmed sales, and then you have your next year of sales which is yours, right? So such opportunities exist, but I don't think right now you will have to work very hard to find such opportunities where the current modes or current product is not being appreciated by the market.
Okay. Great. So I think these are all the questions we had in chat. I think I have one last question to ask before we
Sure.
close this session. So you mentioned a lot about forensic accounting in your small case approach, as well as case equity investor portfolio management services use this approach as well. So I want to understand like what are the key things we should be wary of when analyzing a pharma company's financial statements. Something that we should specifically look at, something that we should check, that some bad practices that you might have observed that we need to be wary of.
See, forensic accounting actually applies to any industry. I will give some pharma example, then I will give a general example. So in pharma, you have to see how successfully a particular company is able to clear the US FDA inspections. So there are companies, let's not take names, which have failed US FDA inspection many times, and they try to again reapply, again they fail. And then there are certain companies which have been clearing US FDA inspections from last 15, 16 years. So definitely the other company which are able to clear are doing something good. So this is one of the quality check for very specific to pharmaceutical industries. And then certain companies might not be doing US FDA at all because they're not selling anything in US. So those might be excluded. That's one check. In general, you have to see how how a company is growing their sales. Is receivable also increasing in the same proportion? So you can plot some kind of, you can use certain tools also there, or you can do that in yourself by Excel sheet. If receivables are increasing, that means company is not getting money, but they are showing the sales order. Also see the recognition practices. Do they recognize revenue as soon as they manufacture it and they ship it, or when the liability is transferred to the buyer? So it's very easy to beef up your sales number, but the cash flows never lie, because cash flow is the hard cash which comes to the firm. So look at the cash flow statements. The operating cash flows has to be positive. And there might be cases for some year, let's say last year there was a COVID, a lot of companies might not have received their payments from the vendors because their shipment never reached, or they were not able to fulfill something. So in that case, 1 year of negative cash flow is okay. But if you cumulatively add the cash flows from last 10 years versus the sales numbers, it should be pretty reasonable. If you take EBITDA numbers, it should be at least 80 to 90% of EBITDA should get converted into cash, right? Or if you take PAT numbers, at least 60-70% of PAT numbers should get converted into your cash flows. So a company might have a bad year 1 year, but if consistently last 10 years, 5 years, it is not able to convert sales into cash, then there is some catch. Either they are inflating sales, or I don't know, maybe there's no sales at all. So yeah, cash is a hard asset. Check the receivables, check the inventory turnovers, and in case of pharma, plus you need to pay special attention to the annual reports. So look at the constituents of the audit committee, and a lot of times you will find the CMO, the CEO, or the MD himself are there as a part of audit committee. So it's the maker checker balances are not there in that company, right? Because CEO is the one who is publishing the balance sheets or preparing or kind of in charge of the company, and then you are again the same person who is doing the internal audit. So these can be red flags. So if you read annual report and don't go in a hurry, spend one day one annual report, easy. Don't, and if you need more days, you take more days, but you complete it. And if you read 2-3 annual reports, you will have certain notes which will tell you, okay, these are negative points and these are okay points for the company. And it may happen that no company is 100% doodh ka dhula hua hai. Very few companies will be there. So you have to take a calculated call. Okay, for example, there was a company which I liked very much. I'll not take the name. And pre-IPO, before IPO, I can see in their gross blog there were 3-4 cars purchased using in company's name. And at the same time, the promoter's son joined companies back in 2013, and suddenly they purchased 3 more cars. For a company, what is the use of buying expensive cars, right? If they bought a truck or some kind of van, I understand. So definitely the shareholders' money was plundered. But then I can also see that the same guys, I gave them some time, and now they are doing very well because they have studied abroad and they have pretty much into the business. So maybe I will pardon that thing. Okay, let them enjoy certain shares. So this is a very individualistic call that you have to take. Uh, and of course, if you get a company which is good in all the aspects, dream. Then you have to look at valuation. Is it cheap? Most of the time, when you get such company, it's never cheap. So all these factors.
I think that's a very comprehensive. Just to close the session, since you have already mentioned a lot about what kind of research you need to do, what kind of things you need to look at, I'll just ask you one last question. So, if an investor wants to do some research on his own, what are the kind of resources that he should look at apart from annual reports? So, if I need to see if they have got FDA approvals or not, if I need to evaluate the potential of a potential market of a new NDA filing that they have done or a new drug that is coming to market, what are the usual common sources an investor can look into to get such kind of information?
The best source of information for any company is their earning calls transcript, and try to read it instead of listening it, because listening will give you certain biases which will creep inside your mind, but reading it is completely without any bias. So what happens in a transcript is a lot of people are joining and they're asking all possible questions which you might be having. So it's a good source of knowing what other investors are thinking about the company based on the questions they are asking, and you get a lot of information without doing any effort. So apart from that, let's say for a small cap company, they don't even do earning transcripts, right? They don't do earning calls also. How will you find industry structure, industry data? In that case, you can look at mid-size or the larger company in that space and try to read their annual reports. At least the industry structure and where this company lies in that industry structure will be clear. So let's say if there's a nutraceutical company and they are not divulging much information, then you can read some of the other nutraceutical leading companies and you see how the nutraceutical market in general is shaping up. If the trend is good, that means this company is in this space is also good. But if say the trend for insecticides is going down and the herbicides and other kind of fertilizers are going up, and if your company is in insecticides only, you know that the overall sector is probably not very lucrative from a long-term opportunity. So certain filters you can use like that. Last option is you directly contact the company secretary or the investor relation managers, and you can pose them questions. I have done it few times, and few of the managers, after persistent pursuit, agreed to talk to me. But obviously, they won't be talking about financials because they are very afraid of talking about any financial commitments to any analyst. But in general, you get a sense where the company is heading. So try to do all these kind of things, plus your usual screener and the different financial filters that you can apply using the tools available. And lastly, there are certain paid systems which I use. So you can explore Bloomberg, or you can explore. There are many forums where these guys have paid subscription and they give you a lot of information free of cost. Ambit reports are extremely good, so I really enjoy reading Ambit Capital report.
Uh, Great. I think that's it from the questions end. We have already exceeded the 1 hour limit.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Raghav, for the amazing
Thanks, Prabal.
presentation as well as answering all the questions. I hope you had a good time as well presenting to us, and all the best for Ace Capital Services and for all in one small case.
Absolutely, pleasure. Thanks, Prabal. All the
Thank
best
you.
to you guys as well. Yeah, bye.